This is Max Nelson. This is a podcast of that's going to be on YouTube later. And the name of the podcast is The Eternal Questions. Where did the earth come from? Why, how did we get here? Why are we here? What's our goal? What are we supposed to be doing while we're here? When we leave here, where do we go? And how long do we stay there in the lower heavens? And we'll talk about the lower heavens. How long will we stay there? And how do we become eligible to move on up to graduate into the firmament to do the work of our Father? Now you got to admit that's a pretty broad bunch of questions. It's it could fill a lifetime to really talk about all those things. But this is to be a once over lightly idea of how to answer the eternal questions, and where do we get the answers to it? Well, I got the answer from the Oahspe Bible. Let me spell that. Capital O, A-H-S-P-E, Oahspe, and those three phrases mean earth, sky, and spirit. The Oahspe Bible came into being on earth in 1882. It was published in 1882. It was published by a man by the name of John, J-O-H-N, Ballou, B-A-L-L-O-U, Newbrough, N-E-W-B-R-O-U-G-H. He was the man who wrote it down. I did not say he authored it. So who did author it? Well, here's where we're probably going to lose some listeners because the people who authored it were spirits of the lower heavens, and we'll get into what the lower heavens are later, but spirits of the lower heavens who sent it down to John Newbrough by automatic writing. That's an older explanation of that. I think the new one is channeling. Anyway, the spirits of the lower heavens, which is just like you and me, they're our brothers and sisters who have moved on, and they did their research under the inspiration of the Creator, and they made, and we'll talk later about how it all came about, but they sent it down to John Newbrough, and you'll be interested to know how he got hold of a typewriter in 1882, and he wrote it down. So that's without getting too far ahead of myself, we'll leave that there and move on to how I got in touch, how I got a Bible. Now, I bought my first Oahspe Bible in 1942 at the age of 14. Now, we were just coming out of the Depression at that time, and for a 14-year-old to get a hold of $15 out on the farm was pretty hard. I don't know how I did it. It took quite a while for me to pull $15 together, but I was able to do it, and I ordered it from the Cosmology Press in Los Angeles, California. This is owned by a man who is both an author and a publisher named Wing Anderson, and I've read that Bible ever since. When I first read it, I knew I was no longer a Christian, and I wanted to become what we call a faithist, one who believes in the teachings of the Bible. And the first thing was that you had to take a bath every day. That's what it takes. The second is you need to become a vegetarian, which I did. and I have been ever since. So I've been reading it off and on, especially in the later years when I'm semi-retired, of course, and have more time to read and study. And learn something new every time I read it. It's amazing. It's wonderful. It covers so many different things. Things like the history of the human race on our planet, how they got here, as I mentioned earlier, one of the eternal questions. Also, the things you find in any Bible. Going back to Zarathustra, 9,000 years ago, he wrote more or less the first Bible in the modern age, so to speak. And you'll find those in all sacred texts, whether they're Bibles or whatever they are. You know, love thy neighbor as thyself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Marry only one man or only one woman. Basic things that all people need in order to have a good life. But there's where the things change, when they change off and start promoting, the people who took over these Bibles start promoting their own agenda, and that's where we get into wars and all that sort of thing. We'll get into that later. The point is that this tells you where the Bible come from, how it was sent down, and we need to start now with the... We're going to talk about John Ballou Newbrough. That's a man's name. John, John, B-A-L-L-O-U, Ballou Newbrough, N-E-W-B-R-O-U-G-H. John Newbrough was born up in New York, I believe it was. I know he was born in 1828. I can remember that date because I was born in 1928. Yeah, you do the math, figure out how old I am. So John Newbrough, as an early teenager, was caught up in the great interest in spiritualism that flooded the country about that time, really all over the world, evidently, just for a short time. He was very interested in it. He seemed to be somewhat psychic himself, and he would had the ability or the drive, or whatever you want to call it, to talk to spiritualists and talk to people who were interested in spiritualism. He talked to psychics and mainly mediums, because he really wanted to know what happened to people after they died. And he would speak to the dead, speak to the ones that moved on. And he was real interested in where they went, how they acted, and so forth. He was really disappointed because most of them really didn't know. A lot of the people he talked to who had already passed over, talked to by way of mediums, some of them didn't even know who they were or where they were. They're more interested in talking to people on earth than they were talking about the heavens above. So he was really disappointed in that. He wanted to know the details. At the same time, he realized it was time he started thinking about making a living when he grew up. So he did a lot, like a lot of young men did, those boys, and he apprenticed himself to a doctor who was also a dentist. And what is an apprentice? Well, the boy and the person to whom he'd become an apprentice to didn't have to be a doctor; it could be anything. But they'd sign a contract for a certain length of time, and what his duties were. And these duties ran generally to, fetch and carry, do the grunt work, do the cleanup work, do what the doctor told him. Don't be a problem. Listen carefully, answer questions, watch what the doctor did in the way of medical deals and dentistry and all that sort of thing. And at a certain age, usually somewhere around 7 years, they agreed that was it, that he had learned, the apprentice had learned just about all he was going to learn, and he was ready to hang out his shingle. Now that phrase is still in use today. It means that a professional man or woman is ready to go into business and have his own office with a sign over the door, his shingle.
Well, he was ready to do that, but he didn't. What did John Ballanubro do when he was ready to hang out his shingle, but he didn't? Well, he went to California. Well, why in the world would a young man who just finished his apprenticeship, ready to go into business, decide to go to California? Because California was a godforsaken place in those days. Less than 2 million people in the whole area now called California. And a lot of those were Indians, and they belonged to the Mexicans. Originally belonged to the King of Spain, and then belonged to the French for a short while. And finally, the Mexicans got tired of it, and they had a revolution, and ever since then, they've become Mexico. Well, it belonged to the Mexicans, and they were having a hard time getting people to go up in all, in Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and all into California, up in that area. Everything west of what you'd call as I understand it, the part of the United States, what's later become the United States, that we bought from Napoleon. The United States made a great, they paid only a few cents per acre for a whole big bunch of the North American continent. And about that time, the American government, the United States government, and the people started thinking, well, the rest of this continent should be ours. It's obvious. Here we are on the East Coast and been there a long time, and we're moving west. In other words, they brought up the idea of eminent domain, meaning, of course, it's ours. It's obvious it's ours. We don't care who's there now. And they had no real claim to it. The United States had no real claim to it. But it worked. We ended up owning everything from the East Coast to the West Coast. And back in those days, well, let's talk about what the Mexicans were trying to do to get people to go up there. The big reason for it was that they didn't have much backing for people to go up in there. And there were people there who didn't want you to go. In other words, the Comanches and the Kiowas and other warring type tribes of Indians, they would raid down in there, kill as many white people as they could, capture as many children as they could, and they held things up for many years. The Mexican government said, well, maybe we could get some Americans to come in there and be a barrier between the Mexicans and the Indians. And they did. They offered people anywhere a lot of land for ranching and Mexican membership, become a Mexican, and become a Catholic. Well, a lot of Americans wanted that land, and they weren't a bit, they had no problem and say, yeah, I'll be a Mexican citizen. Yeah, I'll be a Catholic if you want me to be. Down deep in his heart, he knew darn good and well he wasn't going to be a Catholic, but he said he would. Now, some people did. Some people did convert and stayed. Those families are still Catholic to this day, but most of them did not. As soon as 1836 came along, and the Americans who were nominally Mexican threw Santa Anna out, sent them all back over the Mexican border. That's when Texas as a country came into being. Well, back out west in California, in the beginning, the way they got people to come in there was that they would set up missions, like in San Diego, Los Angeles, San Antonio, all the way in between. And they weren't just churches. They weren't just Catholic churches. There were also, you might say, a shopping center, a community, a economic little town where people would buy and sell goods and raise crops, come in and sell them, or come in and buy what they needed, hoping to get people to, more and more people come in, spread out throughout what's now California. Didn't work very good. And after the revolution in 1836, all the Mexicans went back down across the Rio Grande into Mexico. So that's how the United States, or the people who wanted to be United States, took over the rest of North America, what's now the United States. It wasn't legal. A lot of people say it's not right, but that's just the way it was. Well, okay, now everything was in pretty sad shape out there until 1848. Now, let me ask you, why would a whole lot of people, all of a sudden, mostly men, go to what is now California? Those of you who remember your history will probably remember if I told you they call them the 49ers. Well, I'll tell you. In 1848, gold was discovered in a stream in a place called Sutter's Mill in California. And the word got out by telegraph and so forth. And the rush was on. People wanted to get rich. They wanted to strike it rich, as they said. And here they came. And a lot of them did strike it rich. Some of them made some money. Some of them made a little bit of money. Some didn't make any money. Some of them made money supplying the 49ers. One of those was a guy named Levi. Guess what he made? His job was to supply clothing to those hard-working miners, and he found out that they were really rough on clothes. So he came up with the great idea of putting rivets in at the places where the cloth was joined in the trousers, and they became known as Levi's. Now, I'll bet you go into your closet, you're going to find at least one pair of Levi's in there. Levi's has been in manufacture ever since 1850 or whenever he started making those things. Okay, they're still, by the way, they're still digging gold in western part of the United States, in California and Montana and all in there. Not near as much as it used to be. It's not as easy to mine or just plain pick up. They're still making a lot of money off of gold. So that's how John Ballow Newbrough, why he went to California, and he struck it rich. He did well. He made money. In a short time, I don't know what year and a half, something like that, he made quite a bit of money. So he up and went to Australia. Why would he go to Australia? He didn't go down there for a vacation. He went down there for the same reason that he went to California in the first place. And he went to California to make gold, and he went to Australia to make gold, because they had their gold rush right after ours. Well, after he'd been in Australia for, I don't know how long, a year or two, whatever, he made enough money, he felt it was time to go home. So he sailed back to New York, hung out his shingle, bought a house and got married, or he got married and bought a house. I don't know which way it was. He entered into his practice. He made good money in his practice. And even there, he knew how to make money. He came up with some compounds, chemical compounds, that were of great use to the medical business, the medical clinics, and the medical way of working things. And the main one was one that made it a lot easier and cheaper to make false teeth. Now, there were a lot of people with no teeth in those days. People were living longer, and they were outgrowing their teeth. People did not know how to take care of their teeth in those days. They just let them go. And when it got bad enough, they went into the dentist. They call them tooth pullers, because that's about all they did. And they pulled all their teeth out. And after they healed up in 4 to 6 weeks, then from then on, all they could do is what you call gum it. They chewed with their gums, not with their teeth, because they had a completely different way of eating. You know, they had to eat soft food and everything like that. Wasn't as healthy, wasn't as fun, wasn't as good. But if, when the time came that anybody with a reasonable amount of money could buy a set of false teeth, life was much better. So he made a lot of money with that also. But he went back to his interest as a teenager, and that is he still wanted to know what happened to us when we died. He knew we were spirit. We are all spirits. We're spirits first, and the corporeal body we leave behind when we die from here. And he wanted to know where we went, how we got around, all the practical things that a kid could ask. So he started bringing people into his home for maybe a week or 2 weeks and working with mediums and so forth. And you know what? He didn't get much more interest or information out of them that way than he did as a boy. So he really was disappointed. Well, a break came. And the break came when the spirits of the lower heavens, now, speaking of the lower heavens, we're going to talk about that later. We're going to differentiate between the lower heavens and the upper heavens. But spirits of the lower heavens, which were beings from earth, who formed our brothers and sisters who died and moved on, contacted him, say, we have a project that the Creator has given us, and we think you would be the one that could help us on earth. Well, that was the sort of thing he was interested in, so he agreed right away. Well, the first thing they asked him to do was to lose weight. And then they asked him to get outside more, get out and get more exercise, get out more sunshine and fresh air. And then the next thing was most important was to become a vegan, V-E-G-E-N. Now, most people listening to this podcast probably know what a vegan is. I'm sure a lot more of, if you don't know what a vegan is, you know what a vegetarian is. Well, a quick once over lightly. A vegetarian is somebody who does not eat or kill anything that's ever had the breath of life. It's a vegetarian. You don't eat meat. And that's pretty much it. But a vegan, one step further, not only do they not take life, they do not eat anything that's ever been alive, they no longer eat anything from something that's ever been alive, such as eggs and primarily dairy products, even honey, anything that comes from an animal. I'm almost a vegan. Remember, I became a vegetarian at the age of 14 back in 1942. And in those days, I did eat a lot of dairy products. I raised on the farm. But less and less as I went through the years. And I have to admit, once in a while, I'll reach over and take a slice of Munster cheese and put it on a sandwich. But not very often. And I certainly don't drink milk. I never did like milk. And I don't know what other breakovers I have. I think I don't worry about it too much. Anyway, I certainly don't take life, animal life. I don't take anybody's life. Certainly not human. Okay, they said, now we're going to do this for 10 years. The spirits of the lower heavens told John Newbro that we will work with you for 10 years. 10 to 10 years, if all goes well, we'll go ahead with our project. Well, sure enough, at the end of 10 years, they said, okay, we're going to move ahead now. We want you to go buy a typewriter. Well, a typewriter just been invented after the Civil War. It was a big, clumsy thing. John Newbro thought, man, he's going to take it home and become a good typist. Well, let me tell you, typing is tough any time, especially for old farm boys like me, and especially for somebody that's older. And he found out he wasn't a good typist at all. So, but they said, that's okay. We want you to, he had been getting up before sunup for years. And he said, we want you to sit down at a table in front of the typewriter 30 minutes before sunup every day. Well, that wasn't hard to do. And say, we will do the typing. You just sit there with your hands ready to go. And this is what's called automatic writing. This has been known for centuries. You can find books and stories and so forth about people who receive automatic writing to this day. It comes and goes, but it's always here. It's actually automatic typewriting in this case. And what it is what it says. He sits there, puts his brain in neutral, and spirits of the lower heavens use his hands to type what they want to. In this case, it was Oahspe, the Bible. And they said that you're supposed to type it, stack it up, do not read it, and we will be done in 1 year. At the end of 1 year, he read it. He took it and he shuffled things around, make it where it fit, because it's a big book. And he had it published. He had the money to have it published, and it's been in publication ever since. It's copyrighted. People can't fuss around with it, and you can buy one right now. And there'll be a few of you, I'm sure, that want one right now. Well, I'd say go ahead and buy one. You can buy two different versions. You can buy one which is the original, I call it archaic language. This is my supposition. This is just I'm thinking ahead, so to speak. The angels, the spirits that actually did the research and wrote the Oahspe, not just for the people here on earth, but also for the people in the lower heavens. And I promise we're going to get to the lower heavens. But they're the ones that did the work, and they're the ones that typed it off for publication. And he, the point is that, well, what was the point? Where was I going on that? Well, anyway, the name and the language of the language of the original Oahspe reads a whole lot like the King James translation into English in the early 1600s. It had been translated several times from the original back in 2,000 years ago, and a lot of changes and all that. That's what happens to anything that's ever written down. It gets changed. It gets everybody has his own idea, puts a little tweak on it. And through the years, it degrades, so to speak. And the Creator expected to do that because He doesn't want you to be cottoned up to something forever. There's nothing forever. So everything changes and has to be changes eventually. And it's time for all the Bibles to be changed out. But anyway, John took this and had that published. But what I'm getting at is I think that the people, our brothers and sisters who preceded us, who actually did the research and wrote it under inspiration from the Father, wrote it down, and I think they lived probably in maybe the late 1400s, but certainly the 1500s. And that's the language they used when they wrote Oahspe. Now, that's the book I read first. I bought that in 1942. I paid $15 for it, and that was a lot of money for a 14-year-old in those days, especially just coming out of the Depression. But anyway, the new modern American translation, a friend of mine did that in 2007. And that's the latest. It's the standard edition. It's the modern American English translation. And you can also buy that one. You can buy either or both. And you can buy them from, where else? Amazon. All you have to do is tune in, pay them the money, and they'll deliver it to you. Now, most people would say, I think I'd like to sort of sample that thing if you don't mind. Well, I understand that. It's a little dangerous because you're liable to get off on the wrong track if you aren't careful. But it's the thing to do. All you have to do is go online, download it. It's free. That's the way Oahspe is supposed to be. It's supposed to go out to the world. And so you can go online and download as much or all of it if you want to. I don't recommend you downloading all of it. That's a lot of work, a lot of paper and a lot of work. It's better just go ahead and buy it, but that's up to you. Now, after you have sampled it, so to speak, you've got tied into it, really want it, then you'll want to go buy your own copy, very likely. There's another way to learn about Oahspe. That's the way I use, because I can't see well enough to read anymore. My eyesight's gone to the point I can't even read with a magnifying glass or electronic magnifier. And so I listen to it. I do my studying by listening to Oahspe by way of natural reader. You can sample that if you want to. I think they gave you, if I remember right, they gave me 20 minutes a day free. If you really want the whole thing, I think I'm paying them $20 a month for a whole lot of things in there, in that software. So if you want to listen to it rather than read it, I recommend a natural reader. Okay, that takes care of where the Bible came from. Okay, now we need to move on and say, well, what does the Bible teach? Well, of course, that's way beyond what we can do here, but we can go over lightly, give you an idea. So may very well lead you into wanting to study the Bible, may want to read it, listen to it, or whatever. So, what does the Bible teach? Well, here's I say, the once over lightly. But I think, really, we need to start at the beginning. That's a good place to start any time. And the beginning is, where did our planet come from? Well, it was ordered, so to speak, by the Creator. He's ordered billions of others. They're all the way from conception to disposition. They wear, all planets wear out eventually, and they're disposed of. They fall back into the firmament to be used to make other planets or stars or whatever. And that's where we stand right now. We're pretty much in the middle of the time that humanity is going to be on the earth. And it's just a blink of the eye compared to the life of the planet itself. And even then, our planet's been here 4.5 billion years. Well, how long did it take to form it? A whole lot of time, billions of years. The way that works, as I understand it, it starts with a big whirlwind out there in the firmament. You go outside at night, look up at the sky, you're going to see more stars than you can ever count. And there's even more space in between them as far as you and I are concerned. That's the way we think of it. Well, that's not quite the way it is. One guy told me, think of this. You take a glass of water and put it on the kitchen sink. Then you get a teaspoonful of salt and set the teaspoon down beside the water. You can see the water, you can see the salt, okay? Now you take the salt, pour it into the water, and where'd the salt go? You can't see it. You can taste it, but you can't see it. Well, the salt molecules went in between the water molecules. Interstices, I think they call that space. And that's the way it is in the firmament. There's a lot there, we just can't see it. And everything it takes to make a planet is out there in that blank space, blank to you and I. And plus, and I've read some sense where some cases later on there'd be rocks and everything fall into the earth, and they would be changed as they go down and dissolve and become part of what makes the earth. But mostly it seems to be from this big whirlwind called a vortex. And how long that takes to round up all that material to form the earth, I don't know. Billions of years. Anyway, when it comes right down to almost time for it to go together, become a planet, it is hot. It is a small ball compared to where it started, where the vortex started. And the vortex has pulled it right down to where it's just hotter than hell. And bingo, you got a planet. And all it is a molten ball of something or other. And the light stuff floats to the top, and the heavy stuff goes to the core. The core is iron. Greg Braden says it's iron and nickel. I'm sure he's right. But anyway, it's mostly iron, and 47% of our planet is made up of iron or iron and nickel. And most of it's in the core, and actually Greg Braden says, the latest deal, so there's two cores. There's a smaller core, which is real solid, really hot, and really compact, and then a bigger core around that, which is not so hot and not so complex. I don't understand that. It'd be interesting to check into it. And then on up, of course, you have all the rest of what makes up the planet, and you get up to what they call the mantle, which is the between the what we live on here, in the core. And then I think there's even another thing in there that's slippery somewhere or another, and these tectonic plates that covers the world, and they keep moving, sometimes as much as 1/4 of an inch a year, and they slide in under each other, and they lift each other up, makes mountains. And I know the first time I went to a meeting and heard about tectonic plates, I was blown away. I thought that was real interesting. And it still goes on every day. That's San Andreas Fault in California. They know something, all hell's going to break loose out there one of these days. Everybody knows that, but they just don't know when. It may be next year, it may be next 500 years or 1,000 years, but as time goes by, who's counting? Anyway, the Earth, in other words, is a very movable, active place. It just isn't the ball whirling in the firmament, being turned by the same vortex that created it in the first place. Okay, now we're talking about the Earth, and understand that the time that people are here is just a blink of the eye compared to the 4.5 billion years since the Earth was actually formed as a molten body in the sky. And since then, of course, it's cooled off enough to crust over. And then after that, it took a long time for things to shake down. And somewhere, enough water to cover a little over 70% of the Earth in salt water came upon the Earth. And you know what? I do not understand that. I've heard that maybe it came from extraterrestrial bombardment. If you ever look up at the moon, it's just full of pox where things have been hitting it. They've been hitting it for millions of years, and the same thing hit us, but because of the changing, we're a live planet, the moon is dead. Mountains live and go down, they grind down, trees grow and fall. In other words, it covers up most all of those pock marks, as we call them. But how that much water got here, I just can't get my mind bent around that. They say a lot of it came from meteors. Meteors often have a lot of ice in them. And they say that's where a lot of the water comes from. Well, that sounds like an awful, that's hard for me to understand how that much water could come in on meteorites on that. Anyway, I'll find out someday. That'll be interesting to look forward to. Anyway, we still have a little more than 70% of the surface of the Earth covered by salt water. Now, did you know that we know more about the surface of Mars because we sent up equipment that's still traveling around, taking pictures and taking samples and all that sort of thing. We know more about Mars, surface of Mars, than we do about the bottom of our oceans. I think there's going to be some big surprises when they really get down and start studying the bottom of the oceans. They're working on it. A lot of times they have things they haven't told us yet. That's just the way people they like to keep it to themselves for a while. Okay, now that's how a planet got started. That's how our planet got started. Well, how did plant life get started? How did animal life get started? It did not start by a random chance, as academia would have you believe. It did not happen when two molecules and a little bit of amino acid happened to bump heads out in the middle of the ancient ocean, and voila, you got life, spontaneous. Did not happen that way. That doesn't make sense. That isn't the way the Creator does things. Let's get something straight. All life was created by the Creator. All life, whether one-celled animal, one-celled plant, or whatever, right on up to the top of the heap, which is you and me. Yeah, you can get the big head if you want to. You're the top of the heap. You're it. That's what this is all about. All the millions and billions of years and all that is to get it up to the point where you could be created. And you became a person at the moment of creation, at the moment of conception. When else? How could you become anything but a person at the moment of conception? So if you do that, it just makes things so much simpler in your figuring on things. So, all right, let's say, now there's more to it than that, but we're not going to it into that in this podcast. We'll get to that later in Bible study when we're studying Oahspe. How humans or how spirits came to be on earth. We're going to hold that. I'm not. This is going to be too long anyway. I don't want to get too involved and stir it up. Anyway, let's move on. We got humans. Now, you can call them souls. You can call them spirits. You can call them spirits. You can call them angels. Call them anything you want to. They're all the same. They are us and we are them. There aren't any strange type spirits in the world. We're all human. Okay. Now, a human becomes a human at the moment of conception. That's the great part. That's the wonderful part. You are a human and will have life eternal. Now, what in the world is life eternal? I cannot comprehend that, and you know what? I don't expect to for a long time. I'm not going to worry about it. I think it's the greatest thing going. It's the greatest gift we could have is have life eternal, and I'm looking forward to it. And I just don't worry about the upper heavens. I'm more interested in earth and the lower heavens right now because I'm here, and I need all I can learn here, and I will not be allowed to move ahead until I learn what I have to learn. So that's my job now. I'm just looking forward to that emancipated heavens, etheria, nirvana, upper heavens, whatever you want to call it. It will take care of itself until I get there. Okay, now let's go back down to when persons are created, when persons are, become human at the moment of conception. Unfortunately, we need to talk about the possibility that life is not perfect. Life is tough. There's been times in the past where half of the people that were created, half the people who became human, didn't make it to their first birthday. Well, it's a lot better than that now. Our mortality rate for the first year, I've read several different things, all the way from one in 5 doesn't make it to the first birthday. Some a little better, some a little less. I think we're one of the best ones in the world, except I think generally the Scandinavian countries are better than we are. I don't know where I read that, but I read that in times past where mortality rate was for newborns was better in Scandinavia than it was in the United States, although both of them were among the best. Some places are real bad. Anyway, now we're going to do a little aside here, and by that I mean we're going to explain something, because what happens to those people who don't live very long? Maybe they don't even live to get out of the womb. Maybe it's obvious to the Creator or whoever, whatever, that the fetus the part that's going to be the human body, just isn't going to make it. It doesn't have what it takes, either by chance or because something the mothers did or ate or something the father did or ate. It's not all on the woman that causes a fetus to die before it's even born. It's called a spontaneous abortion, and that's too bad. But anywhere from 1 out of 5 to bigger or lower, whichever statistic you want to go by. And the other way, another way, is by man-made abortion. And that is such a sorrowful thing to contemplate. The idea that men and women would decide either together or one or the other that a baby would be, it's not the thing to do right now. After all, a baby isn't a person till it's born. Well, that's a bunch of, you know what? You are at the moment of conception, you're a human, and you always will be. And the point being is that people take other people's lives just because they don't want to bother with it. And they convince themselves that that's okay. And that's going to cause them so much, both men and women, both mothers and fathers, it's going to cause them so much trouble later on. Here in this world, psychologically, in the next world, I don't want to go there any further. Anyway, that's a bad deal, but it happens all the time. And now there's a third way that a newborn will not be able to get out of what he should here on earth, because we do eventually all have to get experience in an earthly-like deal. If you can't get it the first time around, you can't go back and do it over. Let's talk about that. Some people say, 1 person in 3 listening to this podcast thinks reincarnation is a thing, that it's real. They said, we know it is because there's scientists have, under scientific conditions, have done all the work for years now, thousands of cases, and they're determined, they're from a scientific point of view, they have said that reincarnation is real. Well, let me tell you something. There is no such thing as true reincarnation. Let me say that again. There is no such thing as true reincarnation. Well, that leaves the statement open. Well, what do you mean by true reincarnation? Well, let's talk about that. Usually, reincarnation rears its head when some kid, 3, 4, 5 years old, gets up some morning and starts telling about his former life. He'll tell his parents, I was born in such and such a town. The last one I read, the kid was from India. He was in the United States when he's telling the story, but he told the story that where he was born in India. He told what town he lived in. And remember, this is just a young guy before he went to school. He told about what's the house number he lived in. He told what school he lived in and when. He told about what high school he lived in. He told about the day he climbed a tree. Why he climbed a tree, I think it was to get some fruit. He got into a bunch of ants. And while he was fighting the ants, he fell backwards down to the ground, broke his neck, and killed him. And he reincarnated and started talking. And you know what? Everything he was saying was true. There was a guy, we call him investigative reporter nowadays, but he went over there. He hired a car in India. He drove to this town. There was a town there by that name. He drove to the street. There was a street there. He drove to the actual house. The house number was there. He drove to the school. The school was there. He got to reading in the papers, and it told about this guy falling and breaking his neck. Well, people will say, there you are. That's proof positive. No, it's not proof positive. We're talking about 2 different spirits. That's what most people miss. What happened was that in India, especially in the Asian countries, it's more than 1 out of 3 believe in reincarnation. It's almost 100%. I mean, that's just the way it is. If you're Buddhist or Brahma or whatever, you almost always believe in reincarnation. And some of them believe that there's only so many spirits will ever be on the earth. Now, right now, we claim over 7 billion, but there's been more. But people say no matter what the highest was, that's the highest it'll ever be, because it's the same one. They just go over and over and live their lives over and over and over again. Well, that doesn't sound very interesting to me. That's like running hard and not getting anywhere. Let's not go into that deal. Anyway, the idea was that when this boy that got killed, falling out of the tree, soon he knew he was dead. He knew he had to reincarnate. He had to. So he went to look for a woman who was ready for a fetus to be, try to put it together with conception. And that doesn't work. There's no way. That just isn't the way it works. So the next thing he could do is go find a newborn, a baby, that man or woman, boy or girl, just been born, and he moves in and grafts himself upon that human being, and makes the real owner of the corporeal body, moves them into the back, puts them into vegetation, you might speak, and just takes over. Oahspe calls it engraftment. I call it hijacking. He comes in and hijacks a newborn, takes over the body, and grows up with that body, learns to live and act and eat and go studying and drive and do all those things. And when he dies, he or she, the body dies, he goes off and looks for another newborn. And that can go on for maybe 100 times, varying lengths of time. And that's where you get your so-called reincarnation. There is no such thing as true reincarnation. Well, that's enough of that. Now, you've got, and of course, another way for a newborn, a 1-year-old, or anything up to, say, 20, 21 years old, is disease and accidents can bring death. And those people need more experience on the earthly level. So you've got several levels of people who did not get enough information and enough experience here on earth, and must get it sooner or later. And that is done by way of subjective heavens. Now, subjective heavens is a pretty far out idea as to how to get experience, because you can't go back and, since there is no reincarnation, you can't go back and live it all over again. One time's enough. That's it. You have to get it some other way. And not reincarnation, but subjective heavens is the way to do it. What's subjective heavens? Well, the subjective heavens is set up by spirits who are quite advanced. They may be from the lower heavens. Hey, I promise we'll get to the lower heavens. It's probably from the upper heavens, because it really has to be advanced people. And they set up a plateau on the lower heavens. We'll talk about plateaus. And they set up what I call smoke and mirrors. They set up equipment that makes it like the earth, so that you get the same experience sort of secondhand or made over by spirits that are far advanced of you and I. My friend, the same one who did the translation of the Oahspe 2007, explained it to me that if you watch Star Trek, the series on TV called Star Trek, in the later editions, on board the starship, they had a big room and they call it the holodeck. And you could set up a program there. You could either make it up yourself or use one somebody else had set up to do anything you wanted to do, to experience whatever you wanted to experience. Like you go shooting off to other far galaxies, or you could go diving in the deepest oceans on the earth, or you could go become a British naval captain and captain a sailing ship with 64 guns fighting the French in the 1700s. Anything like that you could think of, or somebody else had thought of. And you get into it, and you actually experience what's going on. And you could either direct it or let it direct you, whichever way you want to go. As I say, it's far-fetched, but we're getting there. In fact, they've already gotten there. But anyway, this is the way they take those people who didn't get what they needed to get on Earth, no matter when it is, and there's other ways too, which we can't get into right now, but it's in the Oahspe. Anyway, they learn how to work with their hands, which is important. They learn to work with your back, in other words, dig ditches, scoop wheat, lift bales of hay like I did. Say, I'm an old farm boy, so I got to do all those things. Got to. At the time, I didn't think I was getting to do it. I thought it was hard work, which it was. But great experience, great experience. I'm no good with my hands. I've got 10 thumbs. But hey, back in the Depression, if your tractor needed overhauling, you had to do it, because there wasn't any money to pay for it to be done. You'd be lucky to be able to buy the parts. And things would break down, and you'd go out there and you'd figure out how to fix them. And living on, as dangerous as the farm was a great place to get great experience. Anyway, that's what you need, is all sorts of experience on the earth. Let's stop and go take another aside right here. One aside that I'm thinking about is a comparison between mammals. All the higher animals are mammals, horses, cows, dogs, and lions, and elephants, all that sort of thing. They're mammals. We're a mammal. We're the top of the heap, as I said. We're Homo sapiens. Anyway, the whole idea is we need to get that experience, and those of us who are fortunate enough to have done it, in my case, I've lived long enough to get a pretty good broad section, but we need to compare mammals. So since I was raised on the farm, let's take cows, heifers in this case, young cows. By the time I was a teenager, my dad one year took off during the winter to go to California because he hadn't seen a lot of his kinfolk out there in a long time, and he was getting older, and he wanted to see them again. So he drove out there and left me with a bunch of young heifers, been bred up in New Mexico, and Dad bought them. The only problem was they were bred too soon. They were too young. They needed another 2, 3, 4 months of maturity before they were bred, because now they were having a hard time having that first calf. That's pretty common. Well, I knew about those things, so my job was to, if I see this having a problem, put that heifer in the barn, of course in the middle of the wintertime, and put her in a stanchion, and throw down some straw, and then I'd take off my shirt and my undershirt, and I became a midwife. That heifer's job and my job was to see to it that calf was born. It was dropped, as the farmers call it. And sometimes it only took a few minutes. Sometimes it took an hour or more. And sometimes it had to have extra help, mechanical help. I really didn't know much what I was doing. I learned a lot, I'll guarantee you, but I didn't have any training in it. But these calves would be born, and I'd put them on that straw and just wait. And sure enough, he'd raise his head, he or her, shake his head for a while, And he struggled to get it, and he'd just been born. He'd start struggling to get up. Well, I'd help him, just to help matters along. I'd turn Mama out, and she'd come over and start licking on him. Well, this is a big part of the reason why I'm telling this little scenario. Why was she licking on that calf? Well, I think part of it was to show love and show interest, and, you know, sort of kickstart them into moving. And who knows? There may have been something in the saliva that would give to the calf, or something on the calf that would give to the cow. I don't know. I should look into that, I guess. But anyway, pretty soon that calf was struggling to get up, as I said, and trying to walk around. And pretty soon you could sort of see it dawn on him. It was time to eat. He wanted mother's first milk. And that's called colostrum. And most parents have heard of colostrum because the doctor told them it was real careful that the mother's breast milk, first breast milk, was real important to a newborn. Gives them a kickstart. Gives them a lot of antibodies from the mother's bloodstream that wouldn't get otherwise. Have to get the hard way. And we all babies need colostrum. All offspring, all mammalian offspring need colostrum. Well, then according to how the weather was and what time of the day it was, I'd keep them in the barn or let them out in the lot. And the next day, why, he's walking better all the time. By the second or third day, he was trying to run. Now, why does a newborn calf need to run? Well, the answer is obvious, for survival. Well, survival from what? Well, our lions and tigers and pumas and all sorts of things. Well, are we going to see all those in a farmyard in Oklahoma? No. Well, what are you talking about? Well, they're programmed to do that. Just like the mother was programmed to, show love to the offspring and to lick them and watch out for them, make sure they got food. All mothers are that way. Almost all mothers are that way. Whatever the animal, including human. In running, the whole idea was to survive, and you had to survive as a prey because the predator would kill you otherwise to eat you. Well, life is hard. Yin and yang, good and bad. Ripe and unripe is a little broader way of looking at it, a little easier to understand. But about the only survival technique somebody like a deer or an antelope or a wildebeest or something like that has is to run. Those type animals, horses, can run long and they can run a long time. They can run fast and long. On the other hand, a predator, such as an iron or a tiger, whatever, they can run fast for a short distance, long enough to catch the prey and kill it. They cannot keep up, most carnivores cannot keep up, they can't last very long. They don't have longevity. And they have a lot of strength for a short while, and they pay out. But anyway, that's the way it is. So this predator goes out once a week, maybe, twice. Let's take a lion, because the lion is the biggest of the prey, the predators, and one of the few that has any interest in the female or the offspring after pregnancy. Most of them just care less. They don't want anything to do with anybody else after insemination. But a lion is supposed to not only feed himself, but bring home the bacon, bring home food for the female and the cubs. But his job is to go out and check the herd, check what's available in the way of something to eat, whether it's maybe 3 or 6 or 9 or 12 or 100 or 1,000 animals. His job is to pick out the easiest to kill. Usually that's the oldest, because they move the slowest, or maybe it's the sickest animal in the herd, because they don't move very fast, or the youngest, which is the newborns, because they can't move very fast. And as I say, they make a mad dash, grab the one that they want, pull it aside, kill it, eat what it can, and take, in the case of a lion, take the rest home. If they miss, they're out of luck that day, because they no way in heck are they going to be able to catch that herd. Once it's spooked, once they start running, that predator is highly unlikely they aren't going to be able to chase them down. But that's one scenario on that. So that sort of gives you an idea of what's going on. Now, why are we talking about all this? Well, I'm talking about what I'm really getting at is programming. That calf has been programmed from the word. All animals are programmed from the word go on what they should do. They live primarily on programming. It's how they live. A dog is supposed to be the smartest animal in the world, and I've heard it say they have the brain power of about a 2-year-old human. Well, you can teach a 2-year-old quite a bit, and you can teach a dog quite a bit. But they don't quite understand who they are or what we are. But they can be trained. And they have more flexibility beyond their program than most animals do. Now, let's say that let's look at it this way. Let's say a heifer cow is caught out in the pasture or out anywhere, away from anybody. And it's a strong north wind coming in, way below zero, way below freezing. Lots of rain or sleet, snow, ground is wet, and it's time for that calf to be born. Nothing you can do about it. So here's a calf that's born right out there in all that exposure. How long do you think that calf would last? A long time. They have a very efficient way of keeping warm. They have a very good coat of hair. And I have not seen one die soon after being born just because of exposure or whatever. Now, let's take a woman. That's a mammal. That's a female mammal. And she has an offspring out there in that cold weather. How long do you think that baby would last? Not very long. Why? Because that baby was born naked. No feathers, no wool, no hair, no nothing but skin, bare skin. And the only hair is on top of their head. Well, most people are born in the hospital these days. Some are born by midwives and at home, but mostly at the hospital. And the nurse comes along, picks that newborn child, unhooks it from the mother, cleans it up, wraps it up, puts a little white cap on their head, put them in a crib, put them in the nursery. And the rest of us get to stand out in the hall, look through the window and say, oh, what a beautiful child. Well, some of my kids weren't very beautiful. They turned out to be good-looking kids, but boy, when they were first born, they looked like heck. But anyway, they're all beautiful in the eyes of the beholder. Now, what happens, how much programming, after all that programming we talked about in the mammals, the top mammal, did they have a whole lot of programming? They don't have much at all. They're born the blankest of all mammals. About the only programming they have is to nurse. And that's not right away. Most newborns don't want anything to eat for 24 or 48 hours. And the other programming is just nil. But real soon, that programming availability or the vulnerability to programming kicks in, and we have great things start happening to that young human, especially for the first 7 years. It's been shown that the first 7 years they learn intuitively, and they can learn so much so easily if they're given the opportunity. I wish I had known. My wife and I had 4 children, And my idea and her idea was, feed them well, keep them happy, show them love, carry them around, and show them you're taking care of them, and then let them go. Lay them on the floor, let them on a pallet, let them tumble and roll, let them learn whatever they can learn. And they do. They learn a lot. They are programmed so many ways. Just as we walk by talking to somebody, that's a way of being programmed. They soak it up in great gobs. And the problem is, we parents don't take the opportunity to make sure they get the right programming. Because last I heard, about 60% of all the programming we have as a child is not good. We have to work around it. The other 40% is what we use primarily for good programming. Only 5% of our subconscious, and that's what we're talking about, is the subconscious. Only about 5% of that is open to creativity, thinking, reading, learning, and all the good stuff that we think of as humans should do. We only have 5% of our time to do all that. So it's real important you give your children the proper programming so they can move ahead so fast. They can do so much if they're given the opportunity. Some more than others, of course, not all the same, but it's a great thing, the opportunity there. I learned my multiplication tables up to 12 when I was 4 years old. Well, why did I learn a multiplication table when I was 4 years old? Because my dad's first cousin, that made him my second cousin, had an appendectomy, and he couldn't afford to stay in the hospital. In those days, they didn't have insurance and all that sort of thing. So as soon as he could get out, he came and stayed with my grandmother, and that's what you did in those days. Your family took care of you. Now, why my folks and I was the only child at that time, why we were there, I don't know. I think we were moving between one house to another. We weren't there very long. But I was there long enough that old Ellis got bored, and so he and I didn't have anything to do. I was paddling around there as a 4-year-old. And he sat me down, and within a relatively short time, I don't know how long it was, I knew my multiplication table. I memorized it, is what I did. So he showed off to my dad what I could do. I know my dad was surprised. But anyway, that showed me, as I thought about it later, the possibilities of programming done in the right way. It's so important to say the right thing and not say the wrong thing. Don't argue around your kids. Don't say bad things. Don't do bad things. Try to remember everything you see, hear, smell, and do, that kid picks up on, and it's part of him for the rest of his life unless he can change it. And changing your programming is very hard. Okay, enough of that. Now, we went through what to do with early death, and we talked about programming. Now, what are we supposed to do? Here's the important part. What are the two most important things we need to do while we are on earth, especially when we live long enough that we've done everything we need to do on earth? Two things. One is to learn all we can about anything. Just that simple. Soak it up. Do the best you can. Learn everything you can. Do everything you can. Work with your hands every way you can. Get as good as you can at anything. You can't do it all, but you want to do a little bit of everything, and you want to know a little bit about a lot of things, but you want to know a whole lot about a few things, as long as you keep it in balance. For instance, when that baby's first born, they want to roll over. Well, how long does it take them for a rollover? Not very long. And then when they roll over, they want to lift their head. How long does it take them to do that? It's a day or two. Pretty soon they want to roll over, and then pretty soon they want to move. We set them up. And they like to set them up like the big folks, and they can look around a little bit. But then they want to move. So they start squirming around on the floor, or in the baby pen. And then all of a sudden they're crawling. Oh boy, now they are a nuisance. They go everywhere there when they crawl like that, unless you lock them up somewhere or another. But they want to know everything. Once they get up to crawling, and then that great day when they can walk. Oh, the look on their face when they realize they can get up and walk just like the big folks do. That's a wonderful day in their life. They move on, play with the tricycles and the little red wagon, and all that sort of thing. They keep growing, learning all the time. We try to give them as much opportunity to learn anything they can as they go along. Keep programming in the right way as much as we can. They get up to where one of these days, past the age of 7, by the way, once they reach the age of 7, they start learning just like you and I do, which is by repetition. But that first 7 years is so important and so meaningful to them for the rest of their life. But anyway, they ride a bicycle. They go a long ways from home, get home in time for supper, and Mama doesn't even know where they went, and that in itself is a great experience. They grow a little older and they become 16, and guess what? They want to drive a car. They get their driver's license. They have the reflexes of a cat. They got great eyesight. They got great reflexes. They got everything going for them except brains. They don't know straight up about the dangers of driving a car on city streets. The biggest cause of death among teenagers is car wrecks. That ought to tell you just how many 16-year-old drivers, 16, 17, 18-year-old drivers should be out there on the street. Not a darn one. But you know what? Nobody listens to me, so let it go. Now, as they get older, they can do all sorts of things. They can drive cars, ride motorcycles, like I did. I talked my dad into a motorcycle, big old Harley Davidson, 1946 model Harley Davidson. And man, that thing was great. I could go fast, I could go far, I could go cheap. It really opened things up. I stayed a while in southwestern Colorado on a farm there. I learned a lot there. I learned about, I had my pilot's license by then, and I learned mountain flying. It's dangerous, I found out. You can get yourself killed real easy flying light planes in the mountains. Later on, I spent time in Salt Lake City. I rode out west of the United States. I went up into Wyoming rather. I just had a ball until one day I got home. I just had my 3rd close call. And I said, you know, that first close call, the second close call, if I'd been a few seconds later, a few seconds earlier, I'd be dead. And another way of looking at it is if I had been a few inches further, a few inches the other way, I'd be dead. And I said, Max, I think 3 strikes and you're out. I think you pushed that motorcycle as far as you need to if you want to stay around a while. So my 2nd year of college, I rode over to Stillwater, Oklahoma A&M, and I parked that motorcycle out in front of this fraternity house with a sign on it for sale. I sold it, and that was the end of that. So I probably saved my life, or saved living in someplace with a beat-up brain for the rest of my life. Motorcycles should be outlawed. Now, when it comes to driving, I say nobody under the age of 18 or 19 with a lot of driver's training should be allowed on city streets. But I was driving, as soon as I could reach the clutch and the brake pedal, I was driving on the farm. Now, I wasn't driving in town. I wasn't driving much on dirt roads, on farm roads. But I was driving on the farm. My dad would say, hey, take that truck over there. Safety was not a concern on the farm in those days. You hardly could do that. You just had to get the job done, especially in the Depression. And I remember getting cut, hurt, and all I'd do is go over to the kerosene barrel and pour kerosene on it, because that was good antiseptic. I'd wrap it up in a rag, tie something around it, and go back to work. That's just the way you did things in those days. Farming was at that time the most dangerous occupation, and I certainly agree as I look back on it, because I did some of the dumbest things just because I wanted to get the job done. It's a little scary that I think back to the things that I did that I should not have done, but I lived through it, and anyway, I learned a lot. I survived a lot. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. And it really has paid off in my life because I have so much good experience. Up that road would be the driving a car, driving a truck, flying an airplane. Listen, I do love to fly. If you have any inclination whatever, no matter what your age, as long as you can pass the physical, you need to take a few flying lessons, enough to where you can fly by yourself for a while. That is a experience everybody should have before they leave this old earth. It's just part of the universe. It's part of the way things work. It's just great. Try to get up in a cloud all by yourself. Make sure there's no other airplane. It's illegal, by the way, to fly into a cloud that you can't see through. But do it anyway and get in there and fly around for a few seconds or a minute or two. It's an experience you'll never forget. You're in a cocoon. It's just life stops for a while. Well, anyway, not only that type of experience, but you need experience with your hands, as I said, and knowing how to overhaul things, knowing how to fix things, how to do artwork, all that sort of thing. You need to read a lot. You need to read the stories of the past, read the history of the past. Realize that all history is written by the winners, and try to see the other half of it too. Try to get the broad view of history, not just from your point of view, not just the United States, but the whole world. The whole world is ours. We're all brothers and sisters. And then learn things, anything, how to drive a truck from Los Angeles to New York. Try to work on a farm for a while. Do you know how many people nowadays are considered to be farmers? What percentage of the population are considered to be farmers? When I was born, let's say 1930, that census says that about a third of the people in the United States were still living on the farm. So that's how many farmers were left that short a time ago. The number of farmers people have been going to town for a long time. Nowadays, the census says that only 2% of the people in the United States are farmers. And yet they, let alone, don't give them problems with transportation, don't give them problems with storage and that sort of thing. Just let them farm what they could. And they could virtually feed the world. That's great. But that isn't the way the world works these days. Merchandising and all that gets involved. It's a lot better than it used to be. It's a lot better than when I was growing up. But we still have a long ways to go. The world is not perfect, obviously. Well, anyway, that gives you an overview of what we're supposed to do on earth while we're here. One of the things. The other thing is good works. Now, what in the world is good works? Good works is the amount of time, the amount of thought and planning and so forth, and the amount of your resources you expend on doing good works. And that's don't overdo it. Not that very many people ever thought of overdoing it. Always love yourself first. You got to take care of yourself. You weren't put here to run yourself into the ground and then die. You were put here to be active as long as you can to do good works. Not be active and run yourself into the ground. You need to take care of yourself. You need to take care of your family. You need to take care of the people that is close around you. and you're supposed to spend, as I said, the amount of time, effort, and resources you can beyond that in doing good works. And don't use that as an excuse. You know, you'll know if you've been excusing yourself just to protect yourself. Don't do that. Well, let's talk about good works. Good works starts off with just simple little things. You get up in the morning. You don't feel so good. Yeah, you know, it could be a better day. I took some courses in psychology. I thought about getting a degree in psychology, but I'm moving around, have family and all that. That isn't going to work. But anyway, I did read that how you feel follows how you act. To me, that sounded just backwards, but it works. If you don't feel all that good, just act like you feel great. In a short while, you'll feel a whole lot better. It works. Well, anyway, when you get up, one thing you ought to do is kiss your spouse. Great things happen when you kiss your spouse. That starts the day off great. And by the way, that man and wife combination, cooperation, and so forth is really important later on in your spiritual life. We'll talk about that. Let's say you got a couple of kids, school age. You go in and say hello. You smile at them. You say nice things to them. Help them get ready for school. Make sure they clean things up. You know, make sure they're going to be good citizens. Take them to school unless they should walk. Kids don't get enough exercise. If it's no more than 2 miles, make them walk. Unless it's bad weather or something like that. Walking to school like I did, that's part of growing up. That's part of the fun. Okay, now let's say you're driving down the road, driving down the street to work. Let's say you work in an office. You see some guy wanting to change lanes. Well, let him. Make sure he knows that you know that he needs to change lanes. You slow down. You signal to him. You let him know that you're opening up a place for him. That's good work. You get to work, you park your car and you start towards the office, and you see an old man walking along in a T-shirt in the middle of the winter. Well, that's not right. You say, hey, old timer, where's your coat? And maybe he would say, well, somebody stole it last night at the shelter. Well, you can't let that go. You get him out of the cold, get him into your car, or put your coat on him, or whatever, and find out where the shelter was and all that. And so maybe you'll get in the car and drive him over to the store and buy him a coat. But if I was doing it, I'd try to be practical. I'd take him to the thrift store. I'd buy him 1 or 2 coats, maybe a sweater, maybe some new shoes. You can buy a whole lot of money, a whole lot of good clothing for a little bit of money at a thrift store, and take him back to his shelter and make darn sure that he has a place to sleep and food to eat, because this day and age, we are very, very well off in that we have tax-supported and non-tax supported places where take care of people like this old fella. Make use of them. Don't feel guilty. Make sure they take care of it. And of course, you supply what you can in the way of money and help, but do your share. And that way you can feel comfortable about the fact that you did the right thing. You did good works. Now that's one-on-one. And one more occasion on one-on-one good works. Let's say you got to work and you did your thing there. You held doors open. You're good to smile at people and all that sort of thing. And it came time for lunch, and you went down to your favorite restaurant, and a lady steps up in front of you and says, sir, I got laid off about 3 weeks ago, right at a time when I was low on money, and I've been trying to find a job ever since, and I think I've got something lined up, but I run out of money. I just discovered just now that I'm broke. I've never been broke in my life. Where do I get some money to get some sleep? To get some food? Well, in the back of your mind, I said, man, I've been panhandled by the best. This gal's good. If she's lying to me, I have to admit she's good. But what do? Do I say no thanks? Well, You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. All you can do is the best thing you can. And if she's telling the truth, then you need to give her some food. If she's not telling you the truth, well, feed her anyway and send her on her way. But if she's telling the truth, you need to help her. So you take her in, we sit down, you have lunch, and you discover that, yeah, her story was straight. And so you make sure she understands where she can go, if you know, to get enough money to live on for a day or two until she can get things straightened out, until one of those tax-supported or non-tax-supported organizations that help people like that give her a boost, start until she can get back on her feet. That's your job, besides being good works. So now what we've covered up to now is good works one-on-one. That's important. It'll always be there. But the real way to do good works is in an organization, organic organization of other people of like mind, working to help a lot of people with good works. When you work together, you get a lot more done. You get a lot more bang for the buck when you work with somebody else that knows what they're doing to do good work. Thousands of years ago, armies found out that a few well-disciplined, well-trained soldiers, no matter what it is, whether it's fighting or digging trenches or building bridges or whatever they have armies doing, they get a whole lot more done if they're disciplined and trained and work together than if they just go up and round people up and say, okay, build a bridge. It doesn't work that way. So anyway, that's the way to do it. Now we've talked about all the experience we can get on the earth and all the good works we can do on the earth before we come to the end of our time, before we graduate, before we pass on, or pass over, or let's just call it spade a spade, before we die. We all die. Hey, it's going to happen to me just pretty darn quick. I know that. Statistics bears that out. At age 95, you can't expect a whole lot more time on earth. But I'm looking forward to it. I have absolutely no fear of death. I'm looking forward to it, actually. But I'm trying to do what I can while I'm here to help people along in that direction. And I know it doesn't fit everybody. You don't convert people very fast. Preaching just doesn't do any good anymore. I'm trying not to preach to you. I'm trying to give you information that you can think about it and might help you clear the way to make a better life for you, both between here and the time you die. Anyway, that's the end, you might say, of our life here on earth. It's been a great ride. I really like it. I enjoyed it. It's getting a little tiresome. I'll have to honest tell you that. Now, what's next? Well, I've been promising you we're going to talk about the lower heavens. Well, first of all, by the way, if you're tired and you want to ring off for a while, this might be a good time to do it. Now, this is the second time I've done this podcast, and it changed because they changed the system on me. Instead of having different podcasts when you start and stop, they put it all in one like other softwares do. And down at the bottom here, they say time spent. So all you have to do is write down or remember where you were and the time spent up to now. And that way you can find it and continue on instead of having to go find another one to continue on. Hope you understand that. But anyway, that's the way it works. Anyway, let's talk about the lower heavens. Where are they? Well, they're a great ball around the earth. It reaches way up beyond the moon, just short of where that vortex is that surrounds the earth, and the vortex is what keeps the earth turning. By the way, the vortex is what gives the movement caused by the vortex is what causes gravity. Gravity doesn't pull to the middle of the earth like a lot of people still think it is. Why a core of iron or iron nickel would pull a piece of paper towards the earth, I cannot understand that. There's nothing of attraction between iron and paper, but I can understand the force that keeps the earth together, stuck together, and keeps it turning, would be the same force that could push things down from the vortex to the middle of the earth. That's the way I understand it. Why don't you read Oahspe and see what you think about it? Anyway, the lower heavens is a whole lot bigger, of course, than the surface of the earth. And it does not have a surface. It has plateaus. It has big chunks of hard surface that anywhere from the surface of the earth up to almost to the up to where the vortex is. And generally speaking, the higher the plateau, the higher the spirits that are inhabiting it. And there are spirits that there's some spirits on there that are going through reformation. They're being retrained because they had a real hard life, and they're having to be trained again as to how to get along in the world, so to speak. Anything you can think in the way of rehab and training and all that sort of thing, there's going to be a plateau for it somewhere in this huge lower heaven. Now, I've had people say, you mean the lower heavens are something like the earth? I said, no. The earth is just a pale reflection of the lower heavens. Anything that we have on earth is in a whole lot more and better on lower heavens. Most of the inspiration for improvement on earth comes from the lower heavens. Inventions. You know, a lot of times inventions are made by two different people back almost exactly the same time. The telephone and a lot of things like that. The people came to get a patent on them within hours of each other. After millions of years, they show up almost exactly at the same time with the same idea. Even Charles Darwin. Another guy wrote up the same thing, almost exactly like Charles Darwin. But the other guy was a gentleman, held off publishing his until Charles Darwin published his book in 1850. Well, that cost that guy a lot of money, but he was a gentleman. Of course, he was upper crust in England, and he had the money. But and that's one thing we need to take an aside on. Probably should have done it earlier. Charles Darwin. We owe a lot to Charles Darwin. He spent years working and traveling on board a British naval craft who was set aside to study the world, which he did. And he came up with this idea of origin of the species. Everything was right except the idea that one species came out of another. That does not happen. And remember what I said. All species, all life comes from the Creator. And it's created at the time He thinks it needs to be. It's not a happenstance. It doesn't grow out one species out of another. We have kingdom, phylum, class, family, genus, species. We have all sorts of gradations down to the smallest, which is species and subspecies. And a species is created to do a job, and when that job is over, it goes extinct. 99% of all species that's ever formed, created by the Creator, starting with the one-celled animal, first of all, one-celled plant in the ocean, and years later, one-celled animals, up to what we have now, was created. Now, all species evolve. Species do not evolve out of other species. and academia still insists that it does. Another group of scientists who, by and large, are not connected with colleges and universities, say that they can prove that is not true, that certain species started at a certain time. They know it did. They don't know why. Well, they know why. They know it's the Creator, but they don't want to say it just right and rock the boat. So anyway, things like the fact that we have one less chromosome than the other mammals do. Well, if we're the head of the group, if we're the top of the heap, why would we have one less? Why don't we have one more? Well, because one of them migrated, one of our chromosomes migrated over to another one. And that combination of those two chromosomes in one made it possible for us to speak. Yeah, we're the only animal that can speak or sing. We have the right combination of thorax and throat, tongue, teeth, lips, and mental capacity to speak. No other mammal is, and very likely never will be on this earth. So even though we're very much like the chimpanzee, 99-point-something% like the chimpanzee, that chimpanzee will never speak in a language. So, and the cutting-edge scientists, that's what I call them, and so that could not have evolved. That had to be created. It had to be put there, and by an intelligence. Well, they don't want to call it God. They don't want to call it Jehovah. They don't want to rock the boat anymore, and they have to. So they call it an intelligence. Well, okay, that's another word. That's another name for the Creator, if you want to use it. If you want to add to the Creator, the Father, Jehovah, and so forth. You can call it the intelligence if you want to. So, okay. Now, where were we? Well, we were in the lower heavens, and we were entering the lower heavens. Okay. Now, at the moment of death, your guardian angels, and you've had guardian angels since you were created, since you were conceived, 4 of them. It's real interesting. This one of the reasons I like Oahspe. It gets pretty specific sometimes. The guardian angels, there are 4 of them, and they work on 6-hour shifts. They stay with you for 6 hours, and then turn it over to the next guy for his 4-hour shift. In the meantime, they have a lot of other things to do. They have good works to do. They have training to do. In other words, they're moving along towards learning enough where they become eligible to go to the higher heavens. And part of their job is learn all they can about you and do all they can to inspire you to do the right thing. Now, they can't tell you what to do. That isn't the way anything works in the lower heavens. Nobody tells you exactly what you have to do, but they will tell you what has to be done before you move ahead. Anyway, they try to inspire you to do the right thing. And interestingly enough, they say one of the things that really stops them from doing the right thing, you don't know, is to eat too much in the evening. If you eat a big supper, you're pretty well loaded down for the evening, and trying to inspire you just doesn't work. So you need to eat lightly. If you want inspiration to do the right thing or learn something big or do some big invention or something like that, don't eat too much. Okay, well, that's what happens. They tell you that real quick when you get up there. It takes anywhere from 5 to 7 or 10 years, who knows, who's counting, after we get into the lower heavens, to find out the basics of just homework, of just housekeeping, just getting around, talking, communicating. You can always speak English to somebody else speaking English in the lower heavens. But why bother when all you have to do is by mentally connect with anybody else that's up there? That way you can speak to anybody in the lower heavens. You do it mentally. That makes sense to me. Also, when it comes to transporting, I don't understand that. They say there's other ways of doing that besides walking. There's hard surfaces up there on those plateaus. There's acres and acres, square miles of hard surfaces you can walk on. But why walk when you can move around this other way? And I do not understand that other way. I'm looking forward to that. That sounds real interesting. Well, you have to do something. You have to keep moving ahead. You have to keep doing your good works. And let's say that you're given some choices. Let's say you choose the medical field. Okay, you start in as an orderly. What does an orderly do? Whatever he's told. Whatever she or he is told to do, such as clean up, fetch and carry, move from here to there, help somebody, help the nurses, help the doctors, help the patients, do what needs to be done. And after you've gotten good enough at that, you will take a test. Yeah, just like, hey, where do you think you got the idea of giving tests to kids in school to see if they've got it? They got it from the lower heavens. So once you pass a grade of 0 to 99, then you can move ahead to being a nurse. Well, how long does that take? Well, that takes longer than it does to be a flunky orderly. Now, you need to know a lot to be a good nurse, men or women. And you work however many years that takes. What, 20, 30, 40 years? I don't know. I don't know how time works up there and how much time it takes to do something like that. But after you pass that test, which is a harder test, of course, then you become a doctor. And there's where you're the top of the heap in that particular way of getting things done. How long does it take to do everything you need to do as a doctor? Who knows, 50 years, 100 years? I don't know. But anyway, after you pass that test, then that's it. You know it, you'll never forget it, and you can use it anytime, anywhere. And you can come back and work at it if you have some research you want to do. It's pretty much up to you, except that you've got other things you need to do before you're eligible to move ahead to the upper heavens. We probably need to speak just a little bit about the upper heavens, because not that it's that important. Now, while it's important, because that's where we're all going to go, we can't really comprehend a whole lot about what goes up there. It's ahead of, it's beyond us. But we do know that we're going, when we become eligible and let's call it, we move ahead. We've done all we can do here that we're supposed to do, and we can move ahead. So we go up there. Let's talk about what we call heaven. The upper heavens are known in one case as the emancipated heavens. What's emancipated mean? Well, emancipated means that we are forever clear of something. Like Abraham Lincoln made the Emancipation Proclamation, said, from now on, all black people are free. No more slavery. Forever. And that's true. They were emancipated. They really weren't. They still had 100 or more than 100 years. Still having a long ways to go to become truly emancipated and equal. But bless their hearts, they're gaining ground all the time. I've seen a big change since I was born in the emancipation of the black people. And God bless them. They've sure gone through a lot. But anyway, that's the emancipated heavens. That means you are clear of the earth and you are clear of the lower heavens. You are now through training. Well, you're not through training, but you're through, let's say, basic training, and now you're up there continuing their education, but now you're in the big time. You're actually doing what you were created to do, which is help the Father run the cosmos, run the universe. And boy, that's a big statement. And you know what? I don't worry about it. I know it's going to be great. I'm going to be ready to do what needs to be done in certain simple things to begin with. and I will grow as time goes by. And that's great. That's all I need to know. Okay, now Oahspe calls the higher heavens Etheria, Etheria, Etheria. Other people call it nirvana. Other religions call it nirvana, and so forth. Whatever you want to call it, as long as you mean the same thing. Okay, now we get there by finishing up all the training we are required to do in the lower heavens. Besides, you say, the medical field, let's talk about factories. You're going to get in there and learn how to work with your hands, work with your brain, work with instruments to make things. Let's say you want to make cloth. Well, what do you want to make cloth for? Because you need clothes. Do you need clothes in the lower heavens? Of course you do. You've got a body, you've got a spiritual body, much like the one that you had on earth, only perfect, because it was made perfect. And when it gets up there, it recreates itself to where it's perfect. And it's made because you don't have clothing, you don't have covering, you don't have feathers, you don't have wool, you don't have hair. You're naked in the full meaning of nakedness, without clothes. And you need clothes because the Creator says, thou shalt not go naked, for all sorts of reasons, certainly on earth, because of untimely pregnancies, rape, incest, and all sorts of things. You need it, at the very least down there, you need loincloths. And that's about all you could get on a lot of those people in the beginning. But nowadays, everybody realizes, or most people realize, you're not supposed to go around naked. And now, Oahspe says the most modest clothing is that clothing that creates the least thought of sex in your mind when you see another person dressed. And we all know what sexy clothing is, and that's just the opposite of what the Creator says. But hey, that's life. That's the way it works. We'll learn. We'll live with it. Anyway, the upper heavens is where we're headed once we're eligible. How long does it take to get there? How many of these places do we need to go through? I don't know. I don't know what the requirements are. As I said, you do not have to do anything. The only thing that's required is that you must pass these things before you go on. And some people don't give a darn. They don't care whether they go or not. They're going to stick around for another 1,000 years. Okay. And also, you don't have to graduate when you're eligible. For instance, in my case, I'll bet you when it comes time for me to graduate, I said, I'll pass. I've got some things here I want to learn. I'll probably take some more training just because I want to. My wife told me I'd be a lifelong student if I could. Well, that wouldn't be a good idea, but it sounds great. I know in school I took every class I could get into it. I even took 2 hours of Morse code. Now, what in the world would I need Morse code for? Well, I'd learned it in Boy Scouts, and I just liked the idea. I played around with radios, but I really didn't need 2 hours of Morse code on my college transcript. I also took meteorology. Well, that made a little more sense since I was a pilot, but I didn't need meteorology very often. In the little old airplanes I flew, I could tell whether there's a storm coming, or I could see it coming. Or I could, I didn't need in-depth meteorology to train me to fly an airliner from New York to Los Angeles and skirt around the storms in the upper heavens. But anyway, I was glad I got it. I enjoyed it. So anyway, once we get through everything in the lower heavens, and we've done our good works all this time, and by the way, we didn't talk about the lower heavens, the first resurrection. The first resurrection is when you are ready, you will enter the first resurrection after you die and start learning good works as well as other works. First start learning good works one-on-one, just like you did with your spouse and your two children back on earth. Once you get to the point where you've got that down pat, how many years that takes, that's up to you. And when you are comfortable, it's not a matter of you passing a grade, it's just a matter of when you can go up and you can enter into the second resurrection where they work only with doing good works for hundreds, thousands, and millions of spirits. When you're comfortable with it and can handle it, then you're welcome. If you're not comfortable with it, you won't stay there. You'll go back down to the first resurrection and do some more training. It's a very flexible system. It's not punitive. You know, they don't slap your hand and say, no, you didn't make it. Get your butt back down below there and get ready. And they say, no, you're not quite ready. When you're ready, come on back. Now, I've read Oahspe about 4 times in the last 4 or 5 years. I'm semi-retired and have time to not read Oahspe anymore. As I said, I have to listen to it. But I caught something that I'd missed all those other times, and when they're talking about the second resurrection, where you worked with other people to do good works for a whole lot of people at once. And they said that a man and wife team makes a good potential for the second resurrection because they already got started as a man and wife working in the family. Well, I never thought of that because I tell you, raising 4 kids can be a little bit up and down. I mean, it wasn't simple, I'll tell you. Not at all. But we fought it through and did the best we can because we loved our children and wanted to see them have the best. But raising kids in town is hard work, let me tell you. It's so much easier if you could get out in the country and away from it all, but too late on that. Anyway, they say a man and wife team has already started in the second resurrection. And I really like to hear that because I miss my wife. She died in 2020. And I was wondering, in the back of my mind, what would be our relationship in the lower heavens. I was a man that I got to see her regularly, and I think I could have gotten away with that. But this way, if we both enter the second resurrection at the same time, that sounds like an awful good deal to me. I hope that works out because I would really like to work with her because she fills in places that I'm vacant. That's what women are for. That's the way men and women work. The women are solicitous, and they want to do the best thing for people. And I'd like to have that available. That see how she's doing it. Well, that's enough of that. Okay, now what we talked about so far is pretty simple, simplistic, I should say. It sounds easy. Well, it's not. Let's take the guy that after he's gotten his foundations, if he even puts up with it, even stays up there long enough to find out how to move around easily and all that sort of thing. He says, I'm going back down where I belong. I'm going back down to earth. That's where I want to be. I want to go back down where my friends are. I want to go back down where the bar is. I want to go back down where the restaurants are. I need my booze. I need my liquor. Well, he's an alcoholic. Just because you die on earth and go to heaven doesn't mean you leave all your bad things behind. You take them all with you. And they're a lot harder to deal with there than they are down here. But he doesn't care. He says, I want the boost that I need from alcohol. Well, I said, how can a man in the lower heavens drink alcohol? It's alcohol, everything's a different vibration, different density. You can't pick up a shot of whiskey. You don't have what it takes. You're a spirit. It takes somebody with corporeal being, a corporeal body to pick up a corporeal drink of whiskey. Well, that's true. However, anything that's ever been alive, no matter what it's been changed into, has a spirit from the Creator, and you can harvest that spirit, as we all must, because we do need sustenance from the earth, even in the lower heavens. And that's another field I don't understand, and I'm not going to go into it because I don't understand it. I just know it. I'm going to know pretty quick, figure it all out, or somebody explain it to me. But anyway, he can get his boot, he can get his he can get his zip from alcohol by harvesting the material that comes up from the alcohol. That's the way I understand it. Same way with the narcotic, the guy's a drug addict. Same guy with he's a petty thief. He's hooked on petty thievery. He's going to be a petty thief all his life unless he changes. The guy who's more intense, I mean, he white collar thief who knows how to outsmart everybody. He gets more kick out of outsmarting people than the money he steals. The guy belongs to the gang, and they set up rip-offs of companies and all that sort of thing. And the gangs that just flat kill people for a living. And yep, they're still around the world, and including here in the United States. And then you get into the serial killers who are just plain crazy. Say, well, what are you going to do with the serial killer? Well, he's going to take that long time it takes to straighten things out, straighten his way out. And someday you and I will be working with him together in Etheria to do the work of the Creator. Nothing that the Creator creates is going to go to waste. It's going to change around. Think of it in the field of, as I said before, think of it as unripe and ripe rather than good or bad. It's easier to understand it. You take the longer view, the broader view. And some people just can't, they think that's terrible to even think that way. That bad is bad and it should always be called bad. Well, I know what they think, but that isn't the way it works. Anyway, it always has to be unripe before there's ripe. It always has to be dark before there's light. And you just hope you're on the right side of the dark and light part as quick as you can get. Okay, now what happens to that guy is let's say the alcoholic. He enjoys life, his kind of life, for a while. How long? I don't know. Somewhere down there he may say, hey, this just isn't working out. I'm tired of this. I've lost my family. I can't contact them. They're in a different light. I'm tired of this. They can actually turn themselves around and call for help and get it. That's good. That's good. You've seen people quit smoking. One day I had several friends that they pulled out a cigarette and looked at it and says, to hell with it. They took their pack of cigarettes out of the shirt pocket and threw it away. And that's the last one they ever, not only the last one they didn't smoke, but the last one they even touched. Now, once you're a smoker, always a smoker, but you don't have to smoke. Same way with alcoholic. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, but you don't have to drink. It's a chore the rest of your life, but you can do it. And it's great. Our Creator gives you a way out. Now, let's talk about the guy that doesn't do that. He just goes down and down and down. This is the way I understand it anyway. Till he becomes somewhat of a vegetable. He just sits around here on earth, doesn't talk, just half sleep, and not good for any, worthless, completely worthless as far as the Creator. The only way he's going to turn around is somebody from the lower heavens goes down and gets him. And that's what happens. People from the lower heavens who are created, and not created, but who are trained to do that, And you know what? That's you and me. We will go down there. We will grab hold of this guy. We will jerk him out of there. We'll take him back up to the lower heavens, put him in the hospital, put him in the nursing home, put him in rehab, and work to turn him around. And Oahspe warns us that some of them will work out just fine, and some of them will fall off the wagon, and you'll have to do it all over again, just like on earth. So that all of that is complicated, but it makes sense. It's none of this pie in the sky. When you die, you're going to go to heaven and sit on the right hand of Jesus and help manage the world. Well, come on, it doesn't work that way. Or you're going to go to heaven and live happily ever after. You're going to sit on a cloud and play a harp forever. Well, who in the world would want to do that? That's ridiculous. So anyway, what we have here, as I mentioned earlier, is a pale reflection of what we have there. And I'm looking forward to the there, to get that taken care of, where I can do all I'm supposed to do there. So there, when I am eligible to move ahead to the upper heavens, that's what I'm thinking about. And that's about the end of I'm going to cover. There's a lot more we could cover, but that's enough for this first go-around. The only side I can think of we missed is God. Who is God? Well, most of us were raised to think God was the deity, the upper being. And you can agree, you can use the word God if you want to, along with the deity, the creator, the father, the grand architect of the universe, Jehovah. You can use God if you want to. Doesn't make a difference as long as you mean the top man. Okay, because there's a lot of gods. God is the administrator of a planet where there's human beings, such as ours. He is transferred in, so to speak. You can call him emperor. You can call him king. You can call him whatever you want to. You can call him a CEO. But his job is to administer the work of the lower heavens and earth. That is one unit, the earth and the lower heavens. And when his job is over, maybe in 200 years, maybe in 1,000 years, who's counting? He'll be transferred elsewhere, and another man or woman will be sent in. Now, there are a lot more men as administrators than there are women, just because human beings are different. There are men and there's women. Women are more solicitous. They are more curious. They are more helpful. They see things differently than males do. It's not good or bad. People say, well, men are positive, and that's better. Well, no, positive and negativity is just the opposite side of two different things. There is no good or bad between men and women. They're both good and they're both bad. It's equal. But they're put here to do different things. Okay, what else did we need to cover? We covered, I think we covered about everything that needs to be covered for now. I'm going to sign off because I think we're getting down to the end of 2 hours. And I want to do some different deal, talk to my immediate family. I'm going to encourage them to listen to this and lean on them a little bit. Because I'm not trying to convert, well, am I not trying to convert anybody? I guess in the straight sense I am, but I'm not trying to do it by, with the head. If you're ready for it, you will take whatever you're ready for. That's the way I look at it. I hope I put things out there that you're ready for. That's a good way of saying it. And I hope that as time goes by and you mature and all that, you will accept more of it. And I hope the day will come, and the day will come when we will work together in the lower heavens and the upper heavens. And for the good of our Father and for the good of our family. It's a great experience to be the head of the family. And I love my family. It is so nice to know that at an advanced age that they love me. It's just, oh, such a nice feeling. Okay, well, that's it. If you want to reach me, I guess the thing to do would be my email, which is Max Nelson Realty, Realty, Max Nelson Realty @gmail.com. And I don't know what to expect. I wouldn't be too surprised if I didn't get more 4 or 5 responses to this. But I think people have moved far enough along now that more people than that would be interested in it. So anyway, that's enough. Thank you for listening. May the Father be with you. Amen.